12.3 geometric sequence. The definition, you've seen these kinds of sequences, but we haven't defined it. So geometric sequence is it means that what's called the common ratio. The common ratio, and we use, in the formula, we're going to use R for that. Fortunately, ratio, so R is a good letter for that. The common ratio R of any term. A ratio is a fraction. So the common ratio, or if you make a fraction of any term to the previous term is constant. So comparing this, before we had an arithmetic sequence, and that means the difference was constant. And this time the ratio R is constant. You're always multiplying by something. It's the same, it's constant, and that defines it as a geometric sequence. So let's jump right in with an example here. Is this geometric? The sequence geometric? So let's say we have, we'll do two examples. Let's say we have -4, -4, 8, -16, 32, -64, ... And then we'll look at the second example, 1, 2, 6, 24, 120. And we want to answer the question, is it geometric? So are we multiplying by the same thing to go from -4 to 8 to -16? Are we? Do you multiply by the same thing to go from one term to the next? What is it?
Yeah.
Okay. It's a -2, yeah. So now it's not always apparent just by looking at it, so the strategy that will always work if you do it this way is just do the division. Take two consecutive terms and divide them. 8 divided by -4 is -2. That's where it comes from. And sure enough, -16 over 8 is also -2, and that has to work every time. And that's what I mean by common ratio. A ratio is just a fraction of any term divided by the previous will always give you a constant. So let's try it here. If we do 2 divided by 1, is that the same as 6 over 2? 2 over 1? Is that the same as 6 over 2? Nope. So this is not a geometric sequence. So that's the definition of it. There's a formula for this, and it's so sort of obvious by the definition that you should know it without being given it. So our goal here, our objective for today, is to find a formula for the nth term. So if it's a geometric sequence, the nth term is like this: a sub n equals, it would basically be, you would take the first term, a sub 1, because that's where you start, and you would multiply by r n minus 1 times, and that is reflected by an exponent. So it's a sub 1 times r to the n minus 1. Because we learned last time, even with arithmetic sequences, when you want to move from one term to the next, you have to move n minus 1 times. So let's do some examples. So that's like your formula, but we still need to use common sense, intuition to do problems. So let's try this. Well, we're going to do just 3 examples, and they're all going to be write a rule for the nth term. And this would be like what your next quick quiz kind of would be on. And then we'll use it in the first example anyway. We'll use it to find the 8th term, a sub 8, at least in the first example. So let's say we have, number 1, we have 3, 15, 75, 375, comma, ... So we want to be able to know we want a formula for any term, the nth term. So to use the formula here, a sub n equals, we need to know what a sub 1 is, and we need to know what r is, and then we're fine. So in every problem you do, you're looking for a sub 1 and r, you plug it in, and that's the formula. Why don't we need to find n? Because that stands for the nth term in the sequence. Of course we don't know that. It depends on which one you want to know. If you want the 8th term, then sure, n is 8. But, you know, in the general formula, we don't know what n is. We just leave it as n. So this one, in the way this information is given, it makes it really easy for us. Because clearly the first term is 3, because it's right there in front of us. And the ratio is just, you know, you can just divide any two consecutive numbers, and you would get 5. So our formula is a sub n equals a sub 1 times r raised to the n minus 1 power. And that right there is our formula for the nth term. And now in this example only, we're going to find a sub 8 just to practice. Once we have the formula, then we should be able to use it. So for example, if I want the 8th term, I do 3 times 5 to the 8 minus 1 power. You simply plug 8 into the formula for n. So that's 3 times 5 to the 7th power. And at that point you pull out your calculator, but be sure you do 5 number order of operations. You have to do the exponent first and then multiply by 3 last. So that will give you a nice, it'll be a large number, and that is what it is from your calculator. Let's try giving different information here for number 2. Let's say I know the 6th term is negative 96, and I'm given that the ratio, the common ratio, is 2. Okay, so this is definitely a harder level when it's given like this, because I can't just say I don't know what a sub 1 is right away. I need to find it. So to get a sub 1, hopefully you see that you would divide, and maybe you can tell me, you would divide negative 96 by the common ratio 2 how many times? Yeah, 5 times. And how did Rachel know that? Yes, Lauren, because
it's 5 more than 8.
Yeah, because the 6th term is 5 more than the first. To go from a sub 1 to a sub 6, just subtract the term numbers. 6 minus 1 is 5. So it's 5 times. What if we were given a sub 11? How many times would we do it? 10 times, right? Okay, so let's do that. So a sub 1, so you don't need to memorize a formula. You would just do negative 96 divided by 2 to the 5th power. That's what dividing by 2 5 times means. So that gives you negative 96 over 32, or negative 3. So that's a sub 1. And our common ratio, we already know our common ratio is 2, so we could just go straight to the formula now. But before I do that, I want to show you another way. If that doesn't make sense to you, you can just use the formula to find a sub 1. You would just go like this. Okay, here's our formula, a sub n, but you have to remember the formula. So here's the formula. You would say, okay, I know negative 96 is a sub 6, so I plug this information into this formula and plug r is 2 into here, and I solve for a sub 1. So if you prefer to do it that way, there's nothing wrong with that. I would say, okay, a sub 6 is negative 96. That goes here. A sub 1, I don't know. That's what I'm trying to find. R is 2. Okay, that's fine. And n is what? What's n if I'm going to... 6, yes. Because I'm doing a sub 6. So 6 minus 1. And do you see how this, if you solve this, it is this. It's the exact same thing. Solving this, that gives you negative 96 is a sub 1 times 2 to the 5th. And so a sub 1 is negative 96 over 2 to the 5th. It works out exactly the same way. So now, so my final answer, so whichever way you want, you pick. and you do, but the final answer is a sub n equals a sub 1, which is negative 3, times r, which is 2, to the n minus 1 power. And that is, and yeah, you could use it to find a sub 8, but we just did that in the other example. So, are there any questions on 2? Okay, let's finish it off with number 3 then. The last way that you could be given a question on a test or a quiz is this way. So, third type of way is I could say a sub 2 equals negative 12 and a sub 4 equals negative 3. And now I want to find the formula for the nth term. So I have to solve, I have to figure out what r is and what both r is. So my goal is you need to find r and a sub 1. Otherwise you can't, use the formula and tell me what the formula is. So if you want, you can look at it this way. How many times do you have to multiply by r to go from the second term to the fourth term? So here's the second term, here's the third term, here's the fourth term. You can use little blanks. If you were to draw a picture, how many times do I have to multiply times r to go? Yeah, twice, right? And that makes sense with the indices. If you do 4 minus 2, that gives you 2. So of course you have to do it twice. So you just use a formula. I mean, you just write an equation. It's not a formula at all. It's just an equation. You would say negative 12. If you multiply it by r twice, that means r squared, you get negative 3. Do you see how I wrote an algebra equation to solve for r? Let me say one more time. If you start with negative 12 and you multiply times r twice, which is r squared, that's what it means to multiply by something twice, you get, which is the equal symbol, negative 3. So all I have to do is solve this. R squared is negative 3 over negative 12. Divide both sides by negative 12. I'm just going to write over here. And then take the square root. This is 1/4, right? So r squared equals 1/4, or r is the square root, which is 1/2. Yes, plus or minus, but the minus version doesn't help us, so we just stick with r as a half, because that's what works. So, so with r as a half, we just need a sub 1. So what do we do to the second term to get to the first term? Yeah, you divide by the common ratio. So you would take negative 12 and you would divide by a half, because you're going the reversed way. You don't multiply by r, you would divide by it. And dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. The reciprocal of a half is, flip it, is 2, so negative 24. We don't need a calculator to divide by a half. It's the same as multiplying by 2. And so the final answer, the nth term equals a sub 1, the first term, which we found earlier. No, that's not the first term. Negative 24, right? Negative 24 times r, which is a half, to the n minus 1 power. So that's what I would have you do on the quick quiz after you practiced your problems today. Or Wednesday is find the nth term, given any one of these versions.